Over 4.6 billion years ago, a giant cloud of gas and dust floating through the vast expanse of space collapsed in on itself under the force of gravity. From this collapse, a star was born, and around it formed a disk of more dust, gas, and tiny molecules. Over millions of years, bits of debris that had orbited the baby star clumped together and collided to eventually become the planets that make up our solar system. This system of planets would continue to orbit that star for billions of years, forever feeling the tug of its immense gravitational pull. Some planets are unimaginably cold and composed entirely of gas, while others are hellish toxic landscapes, constantly bombarded by the full force of our sun's tremendous heat. Moons orbit these planets, just as the planets themselves orbit the sun. All of these celestial bodies are connected through gravity, and all influence each other's destinies in some way. This is a system, an interdependent group of entities that together form a whole. Within this system, there are many more subsystems. The third planet from the Sun, Earth, is engaged in a cosmic waltz with Luna, its moon. Earth's gravity pulls it towards us, while the moon's gravitational pull causes our tides to come and go. This dance contributes to the many systems that help shape our very existence, like the weather systems that create vibrant rainforests, barren deserts, and tropical islands. The moon's pull also influences the complex interactions between warm and cold air that produce hurricanes and tornadoes. We have our own personal systems too. A nervous system that allows us to feel droplets of rain as they hit our skin, or sunbeams as they warm our faces. We have a circulatory system that pumps blood through a musculoskeletal system, allowing us to move and seek shelter from harsh weather or bask in the sunshine. Not only do we exist as a collection of interdependent systems, but we build systems in which to live. Giant cities made up of buildings connected by streets and roads. We have systems that pump water through our cities and power them with electricity. We have social systems that dictate what we can and cannot do, and economic systems that provide work and income in order for us to live within this giant socio-technical system that we have constructed. There are many examples of man-made systems that have forever changed the destiny of our species, but none so recent and perhaps profound as that of the computer. In recent times, we as a society have become reliant on computers for almost everything that we would deem essential for our survival. They control the production and distribution of food and medicine. Our money is for the most part just a number on a computer somewhere. They fly our planes and will soon drive our cars. We've even handed off the management of our social interactions to computers. However, despite their ubiquity, the general public has very little in the way of understanding of how they actually work. This is not unique to computers. As a society grows and evolves, its people understand less about the things that they rely on. How many of us would be able to grow our own food or butcher an animal for meat? How many people that drive, and indeed rely on a car, would be able to fix that car if something went wrong? We live longer and suffer less as a result of modern medicine. But how many people actually understand how that medicine works or how to create it? This is called specialization, and it's a natural part of our evolution. As we develop more and more complex systems to enhance our daily lives, we couldn't possibly be experts in all of them. What's interesting about computers is that the engineers that create them are constantly building, testing, and managing systems. Every time you use a computer, you are using hundreds of systems, all working together in unison. Designing and building these systems teaches us a lot about systems in general. When it comes to computer systems, we can build new ones relatively quickly, and we can replace old ones without major disruption. If we were to change or replace our healthcare or education systems, there would no doubt be huge upheaval and likely deaths as a result. The systems that we have built around ourselves are hugely resistant to change, but computer systems are less so. This means that we've been able to evolve the way in which we think about systems at an incredible pace. And that, it turns out, is incredibly useful. Hello and welcome to Walk with Kev. My name is Kev and today we're going to go for a walk and talk about systems. Steve Jobs once said that he believes that everybody should learn how to program a computer. And it's not because he wanted everybody to be a software engineer, it's because he believed that learning how to program a computer teaches you how to think. And after spending about 20 years in the world of software engineering myself, I've come to agree. I think programming and thinking about software has changed the way my brain works in a lot of ways. And I think the way I approach things like health and fitness and living with and self-managing a chronic disease are all actually very informed by the way I think about software problems. So what I want to do in this video and in a series of subsequent videos is talk a little bit about software engineering, about system dynamics, and about how to apply some of the lessons learned from thinking about these systems to your real life. I think it's unfortunate that computers or working with computers has such a technical barrier to entry that a lot of people struggle with. A lot of people get frustrated working with computers, and you know, I do believe anyone can learn to program a computer, but you have to want to do it, and I think you have to find a good teacher, a teacher that works for you. So what I want to do is skip past all the technical stuff, and we're not actually going to learn how to program computers, but we're going to think about systems, and we're going to learn some of the lessons that you can learn from working with computers. One of the most interesting things I think about computers is that, or learning to program computers, that is that when you start looking at computers and when you start thinking about programming computers, the first thing that you encounter is code. And even just the name, the word code, straight away kind of instills this sense of fear, right? Because the idea of code is that, like, it's code, it's a code word, it's a mystery, it's a thing that, you know, you have to crack the code, right? There's all of these kind of connotations when you hear the word code. The idea being that it's not, or the initial thought being that it's not straightforward. But code is really just a way of describing something very concisely. And computers need us to describe a sequence of instructions very concisely in order for them to actually work. And they've been designed by humans to work like that. It's not magic. There's no magic going on under the hood. We know exactly how it works, and we know exactly why certain code and certain instructions behave the way they do, right? If you go down deep enough, it's all very clear, it's all very well understood. It has to be, because it was designed by people. But when you start to learn to program, the first barrier is the code. It's syntax, largely. It's kind of like learning a new language, right? If you speak English and you go to learn French, it can be overwhelming learning to, you know, all the vocalizations, all the different words, all the different grammar. It can be all very overwhelming. And it's similar when you look at a computer programming language. Like, there's a lot of new concepts, there's terminology, and you have to learn all of that stuff. But similar to learning a language, a human natural language, you quickly learn that the syntax, or the words, it's actually kind of the easy part. The hard part comes with system design. And oftentimes when learning a different language, the hard part is understanding the nuances of the language. So if you're learning French, there's a lot of culture in France that kind of feeds into the language that, you know, it helps to understand as well. So the best way to learn French is to go and live in France, because you get to experience all of that stuff. With software and with programming, it's similar in that once you get over the syntax, you realize, oh, okay, I've learned that. I understand the syntax. That bit's easy. Now I have to go apply that syntax, and I have to use it to solve complex problems. And something that we spend a lot of time as software engineers doing is modeling the real world, but in software. And when I'm talking about modeling, what I'm talking about is we all, in our own minds, have certain models or representations, if you like, of the world. Okay, so to give you an example, if you were out walking and you were walking across a field and you saw a ball sitting in the field, let's say it's a football or a soccer ball, and you see the ball, it's just sitting there, there's nobody around, it's just a ball. and then off in the distance you see a goal or a target or something like that. I think it would be pretty difficult to resist, at least for me anyway, the urge to go and kick that ball and try and hit the target. There's no one around, it's a ball, I'm going to want to kick it. Now, the model I have in my head for a ball is that it's made of leather, it's round, it's filled with air, it bounces. If I kick it, there's going to be a certain feeling on my foot, the ball has a certain weight to it. And my expectation is that if I kick the ball, it will go flying through the air and hopefully it will hit the target. Now, that is the mental model I have in my head. That is from years of experience of understanding that this is how a football or soccer ball behaves. Not only how a football behaves, though, it's my intuitive understanding of physics, right, or my experiential understanding of physics. I know that if I kick the ball, the impact from my foot is going to send the ball on a certain trajectory. It's going to fly through the air. It's not going to fly off into space. It's going to come back down because gravity is going to be pulling it down. It will bounce off the ground. It will roll along the ground. It will slow down because of friction. So there's all of these things at play. And I just know that that's what's going to happen. I'm going to kick the ball. It's going to fly through the air. It's going to bounce. It's going to roll. It's going to come to a stop. All of that is my mental model of a football and how I can interact with it and how it will interact with the world. Now, someone could have played a very mean trick and they could have got a perfectly spherical rock and they could have painted it in such a way that it looks exactly like a football. Now, I'm going to look at that and to me it looks like a football. So I'm going to go kick it, but I'm going to break my foot because I've just kicked a solid, perfectly spherical, painted rock that looks like a football. So all of a sudden I have a broken foot and my mental model is completely destroyed. Okay? I had taken a lot of things for granted. I had made a lot of assumptions about this ball and about how it was going to behave. So that is my mental model, but your mental model isn't always 100% reliable. Okay? Now, in the software world, if I wanted to create a model of a ball, let's say I was making a game, let's say I'm making FIFA or something similar, and I want to model a ball, well, I need to start thinking about the properties of a ball. I need to think about how much does it weigh? How buoyant is it? If it receives an impact, how much does the shape distort? And what impact does that have on how the ball behaves in terms of the physics that are implemented there? And when I think about the ball, well, maybe I do just want to model a football, but what if I want to model a tennis ball or a golf ball or a ping pong, right? All of these things, they behave differently. So when you're modeling something on a computer and when you're trying to think about how something behaves, you really need to go in deep. And I think this is where Steve Jobs was talking about, is that it helps you think, is that you really need to explore your mental model of the world. Because if you're going to try and take something that is physical and out in the world and represent it in digital format, you really need to get a deep understanding of exactly how that thing behaves, how it's constructed, and all of this sort of stuff. Now, you're never going to create a perfect representation of a model in a computer. You can get pretty close. You can do, very accurate physics simulations. But for the most part, a model is a representation. And the reason is because the world is just too complicated. There's too much going on. So the first part is modeling, and that you need to really think deeply about the world that you're operating in. So if I'm making games, like I said, I need to model physics. We need to think about graphics. If you're doing 2D games, all of a sudden 3D games, you need to understand how the human eye works. You need to understand perspective. You need to understand all of these things because you are trying to model a real 3D world, but digitally in your computer. And there's a lot of complexity there. So again, this is helping you think. You're thinking about the real world so that you can represent the real world in the digital world, right? So you really need to get your thoughts in order. The next thing that I think is critical is that you need to factor in time. And this is where system dynamics comes in. And system dynamics is, from the intro of the video, the reason I was talking about systems like this is because we very rarely, if ever, I'm not sure you ever interact with a static system, but every system you interact with is dynamic, right? Like if you look at our human biology, how much can you really learn from a dead body, right? A body that doesn't have electrical signals and blood pumping through the various systems in the human body. How much can you learn from that? Well, you can learn a bit, but you can't actually learn a lot. You certainly can't learn a lot about being alive, right? Because you're all of a sudden you're losing the flow of information and various sort of things between the different components in the system. So time and interactions of components in the system is a critical thing to think about. But actually, naturally, we tend to think of things in more of a fixed way. And I think it's just natural because it's easier, it's less complicated. But when we think of a system, actually what we need to think of is the various components and their interactions over time. And when you're programming a computer, what's interesting is you've got a CPU. And within the CPU, you've got electrical signals firing around. And if you go look at a PC, or if you go look at the information about your laptop, you might see that it's got a processor in it, and the processor has, some speed measured in gigahertz, right? You've got a whatever gigahertz processor. And that gigahertz, what a hertz is it's about cycles per second, right? So what happens is your CPU has a clock, and it's essentially ticking back and forth. And as it's ticking, it's performing operations. Sometimes it will take multiple ticks for an operation to happen, and sometimes it might just be one for more simple instructions. But everything that's going on in the computer is happening over the course of time. So all of a sudden, when you're programming, you need to reason that there's a series of steps happening over time. So if we think about our model about the ball again, as I approach the ball, time is passing, and as I swing my foot, time is passing, and then my foot hits the ball, and all of a sudden, the experience of time that I'm having and the ball is having they become connected, right? Because I'm influencing the ball's destiny in a way. And it's quite difficult to think about time, especially at a computer level, because it's moving so fast, right? When you're doing, a computer can do millions of calculations every second. So when you're trying to think about how this piece of software that you're writing is going to work, and then you're modeling the real world, you have to be able to slow your thinking down almost to be able to understand kind of at a step-by-step level. So systems and software, I think, will be very useful when applied to your thinking about your health, your fitness, your wellness, and living with a chronic condition. Why do I think that? Well, for me personally, I know I've kind of subconsciously applied a lot of these ideas to how I think about my own journey with a chronic illness. And to give a simple example, we can look at my body. I've got an inflammatory condition, and basically that means that I've got a certain level of inflammation in my body. And for me, managing my condition means managing the inflammation. And we think about system dynamics. What we're going to do is we're going to think about all the various different systems within my body and how they're interacting, and maybe how the behavior of some systems is affecting that level of inflammation. Okay, so let's say I have some base level of inflammation, and then I eat some sugar, and then my inflammation is going up, right? Well, what's going on there? We can start to think about that. Maybe I'm having a stressful day, right? And as a result of the stress, my levels of inflammation are going up. So we can start to think about how are various different aspects of how the system, not only within my body, but externally, the environmental factors, how are they affecting the condition, and what can I do to contribute myself to managing the condition? Now, there is some management that will happen through, whatever drugs are being prescribed by your doctor or rheumatologist. But there's also, as I've always talked about, a huge self-management aspect to it here. So when you learn to see the world in systems, and when you can really think deeply about your model, your understanding of yourself and your body and what's going on, you put yourself in a much better position for actually being able to self-manage this. So that's kind of all I wanted to talk about today. I think this video in itself is probably not all that useful, other than to hopefully spark this idea that you are a system, that you exist as a part of a system that we've built, and a system that has existed for millions of years before humans existed, within a solar system, within a galaxy, within a universe. They're all systems. They're all connected in terms of behavior, and we can learn to understand these systems and improve our mental models, our general model of understanding how the world works. And we can take those lessons and those understandings, and we can apply them to ourselves, and we can apply them to different systems. So in the videos that follow this one, I want to really focus on some individual separate principles. We're going to talk about system dynamics. We're going to talk about software engineering and how you can apply some of the insights that can be gained from multiple decades of programming, but without actually spending multiple decades programming. And we're going to go down the rabbit hole pretty deep on this. And hopefully we can find a way to boost your health, fitness, wellness, and ability to self-manage a chronic condition through doing this. I think when you think about fitness and wellness, really what we're talking about is the optimal interplay between the various different systems in your body. You know, you're not going to be fit and healthy by having a great heart, but a terrible immune system that's in terrible shape. Or if your mental health is awful, but your gut biome is great, well then, you know, you don't have a balance there. It's the interplay between the systems over time. That's what matters. That's why system dynamics can be really valuable. I would encourage you to think, as you go about your day-to-day life, have a look at the systems that surround you and start to think deeply, start to scratch beneath the surface. You know, as you look at a leaf on a tree, you can appreciate maybe the fact that it took 10,000 years possibly for a photon or multiple photons of light to bounce around in the sun, leave the sun, travel for 8 minutes across the emptiness of space and through our atmosphere, and it bounces off that leaf and comes into your eye. And there's a whole complex interplay of systems that's going on there, so that you can actually stand there and observe and appreciate this leaf with the sunlight bouncing off it. I don't want to go off on a big tangent, and I will if you let me talk about systems. But please, if you're interested in this topic, if you're interested in how to apply this sort of thinking to your own health and fitness and wellness, you can subscribe, hit the notification bell, like the video, all that good stuff. Any thoughts or questions, leave a comment, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you. Have a great day.